Under the Biden administration, energy prices kept rising. Got to the point that people were just getting fed up. They couldn't afford anything. I mean, this is a normal thing that's been happening in this country. And under the administration of Chris Wright, who is the Secretary of Energy, he is coming up with plans on how to solidify our energy needs right now. And they are probably going to be looking forward. But right now, we have to solidify what's going on in this country to get the prices to where it's affordable for people so that they're not having to scrape by just to have the bare minimum. And so now with what you are going to hear in this interview, he is covers what they're doing. And this is a very necessary thing. People need to know what this government is doing to make sure that energy is able to be gotten to. Now, let's get into the clip.
Howdy, y'all. This is Paul, the Redneck Thinker. What we have here is a channel to communicate. I want you folks to be thinking by the time you leave my videos. Why? Because I'm tired of people talking via what other people tell them to think. So, watch my video and enjoy the chance to think for yourself.
My priorities for the department are clear: to unleash a golden era of American energy dominance, strengthen our national security, and lead the world in innovation. A reliable and abundant energy supply is the foundation of a strong and prosperous nation. When America leads in energy, we lead in prosperity, security, and human flourishing. Achieving this vision means fully leveraging the resources that have powered our country for generations. The United States is blessed with the abundance of coal, oil, and natural gas, and the Trump administration is committed to using them to provide affordable, reliable, and secure energy for the American people.
And that's Energy Secretary Christopher Wright testifying before the House Appropriations Subcommittee on his department's 2026 budget. The secretary highlighting 3 new policy actions projected to save taxpayers more than $935 million each year. The department will now limit the indirect costs of funding for state and local governments to 10%, 15% for both nonprofits and for-profit companies. And joining me now is the man himself, U.S. Energy Secretary Christopher Wright. Mr. Secretary, good to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Tell me where you are in your process
Thanks for having
here,
me, Maria.
because we've spoken so much about the president's directive to drill, baby, drill. You've just testified about all of the energy capacity and the alternatives that we can tap into. Where are you in the process, and where would you say this is going? In what kind of time frame?
Well, the great news is all we really have to do is undo all the wrong-headed policies of the last administration. You know, they came in saying they promised they were going to get rid of fossil fuels. Well, they were a little over 80% of American energy when they were elected, and they were a little over 80% of American energy when they left. The thing they did do was make them all more expensive. And they did that by just getting policies to get in the way of the commercial production of energy. So we're clearing out a lot of that underbrush to make it easier, re-permitting natural gas export terminals, common sense permitting and regulation on building pipelines. We are gonna give a help and a nudge to kickstart nuclear energy in the United States again. Very excited about that. Geothermal is a new emerging technology, but we'll end this sort of obsession with only wind, solar, and batteries that are still less than 4% of American energy. But they were all in on just that tiny little quadrant of the energy sector.
I like that. That is a very important agenda there. Secretary, I want to ask you about Venezuela. This has become a real hot topic. Officials in Venezuela are now pleading with China to step up the oil purchases. Of course, China is their biggest creditor. After President Trump revoked licenses for Chevron and other foreign energy operators from working in Venezuela. I spoke with the chairman and CEO of Chevron, Mike Wirth, about this on Sunday Morning Futures. Watch this.
A good portion of Venezuelan oil has historically come to the United States. Refineries on the Gulf Coast are designed to run that specific type of oil, and so it's very important for energy security in the U.S. The changes in the rules mean that that oil won't flow to the U.S. now, so making us less secure. China is actually the largest buyer of Venezuelan oil today. Venezuelan government officials have been in China very recently, encouraging China to buy more. And so as the largest buyer today, the policies could drive even more of that trade to China. And as you mentioned, we're the only American company that remains on the ground in Venezuela, which sits right across the Gulf of America from our country. And if we were to leave, as others have, the oil production continues and American companies are replaced by companies from other countries. And historically, that's been Chinese companies, Russian companies.
And this is sort of China's MO, become a country's biggest creditor and ultimately dominate. And I don't think the U.S. or the Trump administration wants to see China dominating another country.
Well, you're right. We've seen this playbook before in Africa, in Latin America, in Central Asia. And China has created a stronger presence, stronger influence, and control over economies and governments around the world through using their economic assets and position to do so.
Secretary, what do you want to say about that?
Look, Venezuela was this great success story in the 1970s, 1980s, one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America, a great American ally, a huge and growing energy system that it was very heavily dependent on American companies. It was a great partnership. You know, then they started to slide downhill. Then they elected two communist dictatorships that took away democracy and freedom in the country. And the U.S. is trying to figure out how to steer Venezuela back to a civilized nation, back to one that doesn't threaten his neighbors, doesn't impoverish its people, and send criminal gangs to the United States. So President Trump, instead of just letting it go on, he's standing up, trying to put some pressure on Venezuela to drive change there. I think he's going in the right direction. It would be a win for the United States and certainly a win for Venezuela if we can get a pivot out of that country. They've had 25 miserable years.
That is a great point, and that is really a practical way of thinking about it. If Maduro is out, maybe things change. I will be continuing this conversation about America's business in Venezuela with Venezuela's Maduro's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, is my special guest live on Sunday Morning Futures this Sunday. So that will be something we will get into. But let me get back to U.S. domestic production, because the Department of Energy canceled a $4.5 million Biden-era contract to create green energy logo and website. What were they doing? Just focusing all on DEI and sort of, you know, I mean, the Washington Reporter found almost $100 billion in Green New Deal funding was doled out in just the last few years of the Biden term. That included $53 billion in loans and an additional $40 billion in conditional commitments to various companies. Mr. Secretary, how important has it been for you to erase all of this?
Oh, it's huge. And that was the urgency for me to get a high-qualified team and dive into these agreements. And, Maria, you just gave the summary numbers. But let me repeat. About a little over $40 billion was supplied in support through the Loan Program Office in its 15 years of existence, a little over $40 billion, and then almost $100 billion in the 76 days after they lost the election and before President Trump's inauguration. Look, if those were great ideas that were benefit to the America, why didn't they do it in the 2.5 years after the Inflation Reduction Act was passed? Why did they wait till they lost the election? They changed terms and loan covenants. They basically tried to set bombs to make it hard for us to unwind the mess they'd created. That's just not a responsible way to treat American taxpayer money and to move our energy system forward. So yes, we've stepped into a lot of mess, but this stuff's all fixable. We've got an aggressive team going after it. And you see already American energy prices are down. Investments in America to bring jobs back are up. So I think we're going the right direction. But yeah, we've got a lot to clean out.
But Secretary, why is it so hard to codify some of these executive orders into law? I mean, you know, these oil companies put money down. These are long-term contracts. They need to know that they're going to be here beyond 4 years. So is there anything you can do to help Congress and to push Congress to codify these things into law, like the permitting process?
We are. I was with a couple senators yesterday. I would say there's great interest in Congress to make long-term structural fixes. On the news, you hear a lot about what we're doing in the short run because that's moving fast. There's also at least as much effort on these long-term structural codifications you just mentioned. So, no specifics yet. Nothing has been passed through Congress of meaning, but you're going to see meaningful changes to our laws, some this year, and you will see it steadfast throughout this term. We will not be able to go back to the lunacy we arrived in whenever the Democrats come back to power. I think there'll be some meaningful checks on the lunacy that can return.
All right. We'll be watching your work, sir. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
I am not saying that this is going to be a 100% solution. Personally, I do think that we need to continue developing batteries, but in all honesty, I don't think it's the government that needs to get involved with it. I think the government needs to allow private industry to develop the technologies that are for the future. The U.S. government has been doing nothing but trying to mandate things, and it keeps being shown. You take a look at Spain. They had that massive power outage. Why? Because they were reliant on these unreliable technologies. Well, it's time that we focus on what works and allow private industry to develop what can be. Yes, there are different ways that the government can help, but not in the manner in which they were going, because what they were doing was failing. I want to see us succeed. We need to succeed. Well, we can't succeed if we are constantly only worrying about things that are making us reliant on other countries. And that's something that the Trump administration is working hard to do, making us reliant on ourselves instead of reliant on others. This is a good thing. This will lower the cost. I mean, you've already seen it. Plus, you know people in coal mining country know that, yeah, there are going to be times that they're going to have to deal with low output needed, but these people work hard for this country. Same for everybody in the petroleum industry. They're necessary to keep us running. Petroleum is always going to be needed. All the plastics and everything that you look around and see, well, guess where that comes from? Oil industry. Our power is mostly done with coal. I'm not completely happy with that. I've got my own issues with coal. But you know what? Unfortunately, it's what we've got. And also, you notice that they're talking about that they're going to work on the nuclear industry. That is an industry that people have been talking about that has been necessary. It works, and it keeps us going. And our technology has improved to the point that if we actually pay attention to what's going on, hey, we won't have a 3 Mile Island. We won't have Chernobyl again. Instead, we will have, or what happened in Japan, we will have something that is reliable. And that is the key to all of this. This has been Paul, the Redneck Thinker. Y'all have a good day now. Bye. So, folks, that's the story that I wanted to bring you on this video. And I just wanted to say thank you again for coming by. Hit like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff if you don't mind. Help me out. So, y'all have a good day now. Bye.